Hey, have you ever wanted to start a podcast? I've been trying to get up this podcast off the ground for years and I've used many different apps to record the episode, to get my show to the people, and trying to make money off the podcast. Well, now there's only one real way to do that, and that's Anchor. Anchor is your one stop shop for recording, hosting, distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise in your podcast. That means you get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now, reading this ad. I use Anchor for instantly recording my episodes in the app, and I also like the features on it, like bringing people into your show for other opinions and guests. So if you always wanted to get start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start. That's anchor.fm/start to join me and all the other podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. Hello and welcome to the Grand STL Sports Podcast on the all-new SG4L network. And I said I'm going to stop doing this. And hopefully this is the last time I got to do it for a while. So we'll do a little State of the Union, or State of the Podcast. And as you heard, the Greater STL Sports Podcast last week has now been put on a new network, the SG4L Media Network. And essentially, we're just trying to grow. And having the Greater STL Sports Media Network, or Sports Network, whatever it was called. I should know I said it a billion times. But that kind of put us in a, kind of like in a box. And like I've always said, I don't want to be stuck in a box. I want to do more. So if I don't want to talk sports, I don't have to no more. Not on this podcast, of course, but if I wanted to do another podcast where I talk about the word no and play Sesame Street songs, which has been done before on this podcast, I can do that. And I've spent so much time. I mean, I should have spent more time preparing for the podcast as when I went to go run this at first. And good thing this ain't as live as it used to be. It used to be live off the bat. You could see it on the internet. Actually was trying to do something with that and looked up the old accounts I had, and they all want you to pay some outrageous, crazy amount of money just to live stream. And they're all bought by other people now. I think IBM bought Ustream, and somebody bought Livestream, and oh man, I remember watching, I think it was the Florissant riots, maybe, and maybe even the Wisconsin thing they had going. I think I remember watching that on Ustream, and I think the Wisconsin thing couldn't have been that long. I don't know. My life is all put into one day, it feels like, and that day's been going on. It's a big Groundhog Day for about 6 years. So I just gotta get confused on what it is. But anyways, Greater STL Sports Podcast, SG4L Media Network. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Gstlsp. Follow the network, and you might have to write this down. We're gonna get this fixed. But follow the SG4L Media Network at SG4L Media NTWK1. So like I said, should probably do a lot more preparing for the podcast than actually what I do, which is I get on the internet and I just go down these crazy rabbit holes of just, like I see something in it, like it's like an idea in my brain. My ADD kicks in. It's like, oh, I gotta focus, or I guess ADD would be the opposite of that. OCD? I guess my OCD kicks in. And it's like at my attention span. It's once I see something, I'm like, oh, there we go. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. But, we'll get there. I'm trying to do so much at one time. And a lot of it's by myself. I won't say it's all by myself. It's not all by myself. This podcast is mostly by myself. But it's not all by myself. But it gets rough sometimes. But anyways, so that's the big state of the podcast. New network. New name of the show, which was last week's show. So that's not going to change. The podcast network's not going to change. Nothing's going to change anymore. Promise. Next big thing that comes around, I'll let you guys know. I'll, of course, start the show off with, hey, we got to do this again. Which, hey, it knocks out a few minutes of the show, I guess. But it's not the funnest thing to talk about is like, oh, I've been doing all this work and I'm getting nowhere. But I've gotten somewhere. New podcast, it takes a long time. This setting up for this podcast takes so much more work than I remember it. And I used to do a lot more, which is kind of weird to me now. That maybe I did have a little more ambition when I was a little bit younger. And maybe it's just about when I do it and the times I have to do it and this and that. And I mean, plus I'm trying to make it a good podcast. So it's just work. And then I gotta think about my other job. I guess you don't call this a job. I guess you would call this a hobby for now. But I gotta think about my job and all the other craziness that I got going on. But I wanted to get something on the podcast show last week about the Cardinals closing the winter warm-up. And my problem is I don't write stuff down. And I do this at work too, where if I know to myself in my little small brain that, hey, once you see something, write it down because you're going to forget it. And I do it a lot with this podcast. I do it with tweets, and I go and lose tweets, and then I got to go on Twitter, and I got to look up, well, who was this tweeted by? Oh, let me type in what it was about, and then I can't spell. So, I mean, I had to do it before the show for this Play Huso thing because I looked at it, and I was like, man, I didn't write that down right. Went and looked it up, and I wrote it down perfect. But that's just me. I mean, if I don't write something down, I'm honestly gonna forget. And I was thinking I could do it with stats earlier, and I was like, maybe let's just write them down just in case. But so the Cardinals canceled winter warm-up, which is a big thing in St. Louis. Like, it's crazy how many people show up to this thing. I've never been. I don't know exactly what the ticket prices are or anything like that. It's something the Cardinals obviously make money off of, or they just wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it every year that they've done it. And it's been a tradition for a long time. Now, I like how the Cardinals kind of went about it. The owners of the Cardinals, the DeWitts, kind of went about it and canceling it. And saying, well, it's because, the MLB won't, we're fighting with the Players Association over the CBA, so we got to cancel it because we won't have the players, and blah, blah, blah. Now, that was a good way to work around it. And obviously, it was a way to make the fans just think that, wow, this is all the owner's fault. Or this is all the players' fault. But it was a good way to work around it when COVID's out. And you see stuff already getting pushed back. Most of the stuff's only getting pushed back a couple months for people to, people are like, oh, maybe they'll figure it out then. Definitely with all these new variants coming out and, they're in bees and monkeys and I don't know. I'm not going to talk much about, I seen a meme earlier about, and it said, one guy talking to another guy, and the first guy said, well, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated can get COVID, and then the other guy responded with, me and Serena Williams can both play tennis too, which I thought was hilarious. But, see, I'm not going to look up the stats on that. I want to know the stats, kind of, are the unvaccinated getting COVID way more than the vaccinated with these new variants and all that? You're going to have to prove something to me to make me think that, everybody needs to be vaccinated. Because I'm sure, how would you really know who you're around that's vaccinated or not vaccinated, unless they tell you? But I haven't had a person walk up to me and say, hey, I'm vaccinated. I haven't had a person walk by me at the store, the gas station, anywhere, work, anywhere, and say, hey, are you vaccinated? Or, hey, yeah, I'm vaccinated, blah, blah, blah. And there's been a little bit with it, like at work, definitely people going out and making you bring their water out to them, sitting in their cars and all that, people wearing masks at least to walk inside, which I'm all fine with. I mean, I fought it a lot at first with the mask thing, and now I'm at the point where if somebody's gonna complain about it, how hard is it just to throw on that mask for that 5 seconds before you get to your car? Still don't understand that people use it in their car. I don't know if you think you're gonna roll down your window and the COVID's gonna blow in your face or what's going on. It's going to come through your vents. I don't know. Maybe it does. I read a story today that people, they're finding COVID in a wastewater. I didn't read the story because I don't want to know what wastewater is. I don't want to know who's sifting through that wastewater to find COVID. Like, who's got that job? That's gotta be so. Like, hey, can you go dig through this person's poop and say, tell me if they had COVID or not? Like, no, I will not. Number one, you're exposing yourself to COVID, or in that sense, essentially, right? So you're telling me if I'm holding somebody's poop in my hand, which I promise you, unless you pay me some money, ain't never gonna happen. Maybe they get paid the money that I would do it for. Maybe it's like I might do it for a $5,000 a week job or something like that. I was thinking about $5,000 off the bat. Just a one-time $5,000 thing. But it's all around you, and it's getting that far to where somehow you're getting it from that water. And I don't know if they're testing it through the. I don't know how it works. Crazy to see something like that, though. So I don't want to look up the stats. I wish somebody would just tell me and be like, "Hey, you should be around these unvaccinated people." Which hasn't bothered me. It still doesn't bother me, whether you're wearing a mask or. The 6 feet thing. I'm a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of the. I love the people, but I'm not, the biggest fan of hanging out with the people all the time. So, the 6 feet thing, I think it should be kind of implemented everywhere. And it doesn't always work. Like, if somebody's, like, rushing, they're going to be standing right behind you in a line at the grocery store or the gas station or wherever. The Dollar General. And they're going to be rushing to get out. They're going to be 2 foot behind you, 2 inches behind you. But the 6 foot thing's a great thing. I think it. Are you saying that you can't get any sickness though? Like, if let's say this COVID went away, like there's no more COVID, right? So you're saying if that person can get me sick COVID 6 feet away, they can't get me flu COVID 6 feet away? And essentially, in the long run, we're basically almost calling it the same, but a more powerful version of the flu, I would guess. Is what we would call it, but something like the flu. Probably apples and oranges there, but it's sickness. So you're telling me that the person that's 6 feet away can give me COVID, but they can't give me the flu or this or that. Like, it doesn't make quite too much sense to me. And somehow this all started with winter warm-up, but this is what this is a great excuse by the Cardinals. Let's blame it on the players. We got to get something moving, And this thing, a lot of people are going to be on Twitter going after, whoever, the MLBPA or Tony Clark, who's the head of the MLBPA. I almost said Demetrius Smith. That's funny because I don't watch a lot of football, so do I know that the NFLPA guy, I almost said his name, but sports knowledge is running through my head. So, they kind of played it on the players. And really, it was been a good excuse to stop it for this COVID thing. Because it's really going to be hard to get control. People are going to want the 6 feet thing again. The mask when there's not a mandate. It'd be kind of an iffy thing. And it's just something probably they didn't want to deal with. Because they could have just went old school players the whole time. I wouldn't mind going down there and still seeing Ozzie and Willie. And I guess Willie couldn't come because he's a coach. It seems like they're still hiring coaches. I don't know how that works either. I don't know exactly if I read it right, but I know that former players are on there. So guys like Langford and Edmonds doesn't work for the MLB. Just players like that. I don't know if Edmonds or Keith Hernandez or somebody like that would want to mess up their job by doing something like this. But it could have still been ran very easily. Definitely with guys like, you got Rowling got to go in the Hall of Fame. That could have been a big attraction. And you always got guys around. Brad Thompson on the radio. And people like that. The Cardinals fans are going to come see you anyways. If you want to go into a warm-up. And I'm sure there's other things down there. I'm sure I'm not sure how they can hand out the giveaways and the bobbleheads or stuff like that. I think they're still selling them online, but they're not selling them as like, hey, this Cardinals third baseman bobblehead. Or however it works. I'm not out here buying a bunch of Cardinals crap. I'm not out here buying bobbleheads, at least. So I don't know how all that works, but it seemed like a good excuse for the go-around. And maybe something like this did step up to talking because they're going to meet Thursday and MLB owners, so they're going to come out with some economic plan and all this. So I doubt that the little St. Louis market made a big change, but do you really want to be bothered with, hey, we canceled the winter warm-up and now they're going to go after you and this and that. Let's get this going, and I'm so disappointed and blah, blah, blah. I'm never going to watch baseball again. And I mean, some of the stuff I see, the funny thing is they started blaming it on Mozeliak, which is great because he had nothing to do with it. He's no more owner or a player. And I see, oh, Bill DeWitt, John Mozeliak, I'm never watching Cardinals games again. But you know, if somebody's watched religiously and just because they canceled a thing that is actually during a pandemic again, but what they blamed it on it being canceled for, I don't know if that's the biggest deal to them. Definitely when billions of dollars are at stake and you're messing with some little thing in a ballroom in St. Louis. But it's going to make, it makes people think, that, hey, something like this could get a jump start because the fans want to see something. And you've done this for so long that definitely after what happened last year, you probably don't want to lose it again. Definitely if it's a moneymaker. And I don't know how big it is. I think I said this twice now. My favorite thing about it was the Cardinals just basically saying, oh, it's blame it on the players, blame it on the players, blame it on the players. Which is, it's kind of funny to see the players still do whatever they want and do all that. Like, I can't fathom, like Harrison Bader went to a school and was a substitute PE teacher or something like that. Blah, 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 blah. What's he doing in St. Louis in the middle of winter is beyond me. But, like, the Cardinals don't have to authorize that. Like, he can just go do it. Like, the Cardinals have no, like, do they have no say? Like, it makes zero sense to me how all this works. And I guess it's just all about money. And I guess you're not trying to take your players away from the fans in that situation. Definitely when you got this thing going on with the CBA. Baseball's shut down right now. You're not getting a free agency. I mean, people aren't getting their dopamine from baseball right now with everything being shut down. Because I don't know if people are looking forward to spring training because you don't know when it's going to happen. And I think that's going to put fans a little on edge. Definitely in a town where during the summer baseball is your thing. It's definitely going to put Cardinals fan on edge because and that's what you look forward to. Is Blues playoffs and the start of baseball season. And if you lose one, it kind of becomes a boring thing because hockey, baseball's almost an everyday thing. Hockey's not really that way. I mean, sometimes they go 3 and 4 days, but sometimes they got weeks off. Like in February for the Olympics, they're gonna have a week off. And what are you gonna do then? And by then, I hear a lot of people saying that spring training. I don't think that their usual spring training is going to start on time. I think spring training will start on time. And I think it's probably going to be with a lot of minor league guys at first because they're going to want guys to get in shape. You want your big guys to be ready and not be a little out of shape and maybe tweak a muscle or pull a muscle or tear a muscle. So I think at first you're actually going to see a lot of these minor league guys. I think in the beginning of spring training, because I think it's going to start on time, you're going to see a lot of Nolan Gorman and Matthew Lipitor. Probably see a lot of Juan Yepes. Brandon Diamond's the guy that's going to be in there. Jordan Walker, Zach Thompson. So, it's not the biggest deal to me that the things aren't happening. But I'm also a sports fan. Like, when I'm locked into something, I'm not going to be locked into spring training. Like, it's fun to watch and stuff, but it's usually during the day. Blues games are night. Easier to keep track of. Like, when you're trying to keep up with a 4-hour spring training game with 75 guys in there. Like, it's not the funnest thing in the world, which I think the spring training game should automatically be cut down to 7 innings. Just because they're going to last so long with people going in and out. And, you're going to want to get certain guys work. because some of the guys ain't gonna make it. Their season will start for a while, so they're going to extended spring training and all that. So the work you can get the young guys, the more work, the better it all works out, because now you see what you have. And I don't think that at the beginning, I don't think that any team, really, honestly, is going to call up a lot of minor leaguers to the roster, unless it's the Rays or the lower tier teams like Miami and Pittsburgh. And I was going to say Detroit, but Detroit's been going at it in the free agency. But the lower tier teams, Athletics would be one. But I think the teams like the Cardinals and stuff are going to go into the season and be like, we didn't have the regular spring training. So if, a player's looking crappy in spring training, like, well, hey, we'll give him we'll give him this extra chance. And then you don't have to waste their years, because now you're not calling somebody up till probably at least June. So you would think that at this point, everybody wants baseball back, but you think that the owners might try to hold that off, unless they come up with something like, hey, we got a credit for this because we were out for this long and this and that, which I don't think is going to happen. I think they sign a new CBA, they go right into it. And whatever it is. And maybe that rule's not even in the new CBA, where if you bring up a guy after a certain time, then it doesn't count against his minor league or his major league years. So I don't know if it's the worst thing in the world that they got to cancel this for the owners and got to cancel this and blame it on the players. And it also gives the players the breaks. It also, who wants to drive into St. Louis in the middle of winter when you're somewhere, thinking, Yachty trains in the Dominican Republic. A lot of these guys train down in Jupiter. Like, would you rather want to be in Jupiter in the middle of the winter? Or would you rather want to be in St. Louis in the middle of winter? I mean, it's not a hard decision for me at all. And I love St. Louis. But I'm a little bit bigger fan of the hotter states. Like, I wasn't, like, people were telling me when I lived in Arizona, like, oh, you're not going to like this dry heat and blah, and this and that. You're not going to like it being 100 degrees. And you know what? I was a big fan. Now, a lot of problems with dry heat is it dries out your skin. So, I'm not a big fan of wearing, like, sandals and stuff. And you have to do that, like, if you wear socks and shoes and tennis shoes and all that, and you're running through that sand and stuff, like, your feet are, like, the most, like, they start cracking and it hurting, and it's crazy in that. Which I bet your body gets used to it somehow. My body got used to, being outside pretty quick. But I still love St. Louis. Wintertime isn't all that bad here. It's been bad this year. I mean, I've walked in blizzards in St. Louis. Like I'm saying, I think your body just gets used to what's happening. But hey, why not giving the players a little bit more of a extended vacation and, try to slowly make it towards, February or March and have this thing ready to go. I think it's smart all around. And I think the Players Association is probably thinking the same team. Hey, we get our players some extra time off. They don't have to do all these gigs, They get to spend time with their family. It could come around to where the players are like, we had our little extended break. Let's get this stuff going. Let's give in on this. Or, same thing with the owners. Like, hey, we played it into y'all a little bit. We didn't have to run everything this year. Maybe this helps us down the line with minor league players and stuff like that because we don't have to call them up, this and that. Let's get these things rolling. So, people I can understand are disappointed that it's canceled, but hey, you save some money. It doesn't work. You don't get your, your signatures on your balls, and which sounds weird, on your baseballs, or your hats, or your posters, or whatever, and that sucks. But stuff happens. That's what happens. It's crazy to think about that. You're at a point where it could happen because of how easy it's been, really, since '94, and I wasn't old enough in '94 to remember a whole bunch of it. The Cardinals weren't all that great, probably. Like, I can remember a little bit of '92, a little bit of '93, and '94 just kind of skips me. I remember a little bit of '95. Remember '96 because it was the first time that I actually remember the Cardinals making having a chance in the playoffs. And then '97 with McGuire, '98 and '99. Those are easy years to remember. For some reason, I just really don't remember that striking season. So it's a loss for the fans, which in the long run could hurt your bottom line, with fans maybe not wanting to come back. But I don't think that the win. I don't know how many teams do this. Is the big thing. Like I'm looking at the Cardinals, and I see the Cardinals, and I go through the news sites and all that, and which is one of the harder things to do, is just trying to figure out what you want to talk about. Like, oh, do I want to go with a sports story, like weird news? Like, do I want to do weird news this week or do I not? But I mean, I try to look up enough to like see it, but and I don't see many other teams with this kind of thing that St. Louis has going. But it is something to think about. Like, did they do this? Like, they have this chance to throw something at the players, throw shade at the players, and they did because they did this with older players. And it's something different because you lost your football team, and this is why, like, I'm not big on college football anymore because I think I used to watch college football a little more when we had a football team, just to be like, oh, that player from Missouri could go to the Rams. At this time, like you know, the Rams are in the draft here. Like in the last few years, like it wasn't a big thing. Like you knew the Rams were going to be up high. They had to go for a quarterback, or they had to do this. They have to get the offensive line back, or this or that. It was something. So there wasn't many Mizzou players that you thought were going to be like on the Rams, but like the national championship game was last night, and Georgia pulls it out 33-19, and I really couldn't tell you a player on either team. And I've heard names today, and I thought, I remember this quarterback's name, or I remember, and I do remember, I think Bryce Young's the quarterback of Alabama. And that's how far I could go through these podcasts and just show you that I knew a little bit about college football when the Rams were here. And I think it's kind of moved my attraction a little bit more to the college basketball, which I was always a big college basketball fan anyways. But I think it moved some of my interest there. And it really put a lot more of my interest in the Blues, because until I went to my first hockey game, the Blues, they're just, the hockey team that plays, when I'm not watching Rams games. But watching the national championship, I just couldn't think of, and I think because Mizzou hasn't been good in a few years, and I think that hurts it a lot, that you want the team to be good, because you can probably go out there and Bolton from a couple years ago, the linebacker, and that's about it that I can remember. And I can't even name the players on Mizzou, like the quarterback Tyler Blazelak, and that's probably wrong a bit. I remember I know Beatty at running back, and that's about it. Like, I don't think anybody on that offense is going to the NFL except for Beatty. So I think that kind of loses some of your interest in it too. They're not a good team. You're not going to see none of these players move on anyways. You're just going to have to reacclimate and see who you got next year. And I think it's a little harder with college. Because there's so many people that you have to go through. Because, they're trying to find the best team to win. So you're seeing these guys that, are here for 3 or 4 years, and then you got to reset again. And in the NFL, you're going to see them for, upwards and hopefully 5 to 10 years. And I think that's why I know more of the offensive players than I do the defensive players, because when you kind of lose your interest in something, you're going to watch the good stuff, which is usually the offense. That's usually what's shown. But yeah, I'm with the Mizzou. I'm at Beatty, and after that, I'm just like, yeah. And I think I maybe kind of lose my interest in college football as a whole. And I kind of think it might just be the 4-team thing too, because that 2 SEC teams are going to make it, and you kind of know Alabama's going to be there, and they only got to win one game to get there, and Nick Saban's probably going to win that game to get to the national championship. and then we'll see what it goes from there. But I think a little more interest will be put into it, which they probably got some of the biggest network TV things in the world. I'm just not watching it, and I think that maybe your team not having a chance, like that like Mizzou's probably not going to get that thing when they got to go through. I mean, not just the SEC with Alabama and Auburn, and now we can't beat Kentucky. But then even when you go into the playoffs, you got Clemson and the Notre Dames and Oklahoma's. I mean, you're just not up to that caliber. And I think the college football playoffs is going to have to expand just for that. Now, I was at 8 teams earlier today when I was thinking about it. 8 teams would be a good number. And you'd probably get 3 SEC teams in there. But I think the only way it would be good for Mizzou is if you got to 12. I think that's your chance to at least be in the playoff. I mean, a playoff game is a lot different than some game against Vanderbilt or some game against Florida, even Florida. You can say, hey, we had a chance to win the championship. And they probably won't. They probably won't have a chance to go. They'll probably get blown out in that first game. But hey, we made it to that playoff. We were one of the top 12 teams. And it just sounds like a weird number to me going with 12. I don't know why. I mean, it's all logistics and stuff like that. Like 15, I don't know if you could work that. I mean, I guess you can always work something. Maybe 15 in a wild card. You have a wild card game, and that's an extra game in the playoff. I'm sure the college football would love that. I'm sure that ESPN would love that. I mean, definitely when you got teams like Oklahoma and Texas wanting to move to the SEC in 2025, and that's when this can be changed. And I think that makes a big difference for a team like Mizzou or teams like Texas A&M or now any team in the Big 12 that like, hey, we need as many teams as we can get in this thing so we at least have some kind of shot or at least have a compass resemblance. Because once you move more teams to the SEC, of course there's their RPIs and all that and that's schedule strength, and I think RPI is more basketball, but still. I mean, that's what they look at, schedule strength and stuff like that, divisional opponents. So when you're adding 2 powerhouses to another thing, and that's games that right now looks like Mizzou or another 2 games that you add on the schedule that Mizzou are going to lose at some point. I think to keep the interest with all these teams building these super conferences, the only way to keep real interest in it is to expand, to keep people's eyes on the team and keep people's eyes on football. Definitely in Missouri it'd be 50-50 split, but in Alabama even. But St. Louis even. I mean, it's split half and half. I mean, you got Kansas City and you got St. Louis from Mizzou. So you got a market out there for an NFL team in Kansas City, but it's also on different days and stuff like that. And hey, maybe you do want to see Mizzou, and you could say, hey, my team's made the playoffs. Both my teams. Like, I don't know if Mizzou made the playoffs. Like, I would really be like, hey, we made the playoffs. For the Cardinals, I raved all over it. So I probably would. It would be something to see. It'd be something different than what it has been. It'd be interesting to see, hey, we just got some decent players, maybe we do got a shot. Maybe we can take down, this. And it would be, this would be a thing. If Illinois stays where they're at, there's your chance to get that bragging rights game in football. Which would be kind of cool, because you're probably not going to get it if it's in the top 8 teams. Unless you're that good. Definitely with Michigan's floating around. Michigan State has been good. And was good at football at one time. I don't know how they are anymore. My loss in college football. My loss of interest in college football tells you that right there. So that's something interesting that you could look at from a Mizzou perspective. Or an Illinois perspective. But even when you got these stinker teams, Cincinnati is another one of them. they're in a pretty, they're not in the best conference. But they could get shots if some of these teams have one good season. I mean, Kentucky has never had a shot. Never been really that good at football. You could give them, that would give them a shot. That would put some interest in it. Another team that doesn't have NFL football, that has a large fan base, that you might be able to commute some of the basketball guys over to the football side. And you would think and I went 13 years old right there. You would, it's the squeal of my voice. You would think that a team like Kentucky would somehow have the boost of support that they would because of the basketball team. And I think the NLIs make a difference, and you're going to probably see a lot more of these teams that only have, college sports really start getting some of these bigger, like Kentucky, getting some of these bigger recruits because of the NIL deals, where they're going to make money because you have the strength and power at the college in Kentucky and the boosters and stuff to be like, well, this guy, he's a millionaire that owns, this hotel chain. Well, hey, have him be your smart spokesman or your front door. I don't know. Have meet and greets or whatever at the front door. And, something easy. And these, hey, I would do that for whatever. I'd go to wherever. Jackson State's all of a sudden getting all these crazy amount of recruits. Because they're down in Florida, which is a big college town with the Florida State and Miami and the Gators. And you got name recognition and Deion Sanders. So now you got guys going down there because of these NILs. And I think if you're a booster that likes football in St. Louis, I think you could be like, hey, if you can get this guy here, I could get him some things down in St. Louis. Like, he probably wouldn't even have to come down. We could, hey, record this commercial and he can do it from Columbia. You wouldn't even have to deal with St. Louis. But you can get money from St. Louis plus whatever Columbia can give you. Plus, you're in the big, and that's what I don't think. That's what I just don't get about Mizzou. Is you're in the SEC and you can't do this. You would think it would make a difference, like, hey, these players don't want to they want to play in the SEC, but they're not going to get on the Alabamas or the Auburns because Alabama has 19 NFLers. So how is Mizzou not getting these people? How is Kentucky getting them people over Mizzou? And now even Jackson State, which is even weirder. I do have one stat from that national championship game, by the way. It's only the second time Nick Saban's lost to a former coach of his, and that Kirby Smart, and his other one was Jimbo Fisher. Now that's one I don't remember. I'm gonna guess Texas A&M. I'm gonna guess this. I don't remember who Alabama lost to, but I'm pretty sure it was Texas A&M. So I think this is the first time that Nick Saban got beat by an assistant. It was in the same year. So this, and this Alabama being there every year should be an accomplishment to anybody. And I understand people are like, oh, they got the best team, they should win every year. Well, sometimes you have bad days. And some of my Alabama players, along with the Georgia players, but when you lose your top wide receiver, and some of these guys are, you're gonna falter in the big spotlight sometimes. It just looked like some of the players look like deer in the headlights. And you don't know, maybe some were thinking like, well, I really don't need to play in this game. I know it's for a national championship, but I could say I made the national championship game and I was the third pick in the NFL. Or I could say I won the championship game, but I tore my ACL, and now I don't have a chance. I don't know if my leg's ever going to get better or anything like that. Kind of like the kid the wide receivers after the kid went down from St. Louis, the wide receiver for Alabama. Now those guys couldn't catch the balls. And now you feel bad for this kid because he's probably playing a game, probably not thinking about it's just an extra game. You have to worry about that kind of stuff. So I don't know if that was part of it, probably some of it, but I think, big setting, whole different atmosphere than playing, when you're home game in Alabama, when you're coming to an NFL stadium. You're playing in front of probably a bigger TV audience than you're used to, probably a bigger stadium been used to, and you got to go out here and you got to win a national championship, man. That's got to be rough. So we'll see how much. And this expansion is going to come for 2 years to 2020. And I don't know. I know they met about it, and I don't know what came out of it. I don't know if they can say, "Hey, in 2025 we're going to change it." Blah blah blah. I just don't know what come out of these meetings yet. It's kind of like I understand like the MLB players meet about the CBA last year, but 5 years ago, what's going to happen? I guess you could come to agreement on some things, but mine's always changed too. Like 3 years down the road after we made this decision, could I be like, well, you're making a little bit more money than we thought, so we need to up our things, and the owner's like, no, you agreed to this. Or like this, the commissioner in the Big 12 says, no, the SEC agreed to this. And now, and I mean, politics always hurt everything. When someone's trying to be the top dog, they're trying to make a little dog. And that's just how these things work. Now, there's been a lot of, what I feel like, been a lot of people butthurt in the media lately. And it was funny, I was reading something about Steve Harvey today saying he's got a million shows. Judge Steve Harvey's on now. What the hell? This dude's get a job everywhere. Said he wanted to do another stand-up because of cancel culture. Because it's just all around now. And it's even gotten to, like, not even just reporters, but you got the MLB commissioner who's going through all this stuff he's going through right now. Getting a reporter fired because he felt like the reporter was talking bad about him because of the way he ended up the 2020 thing, which he was. And it wasn't handled the best way. So you get him fired, you get one of the biggest insiders in the MLB fired because you're butthurt. And that's essentially what cancel culture is. I mean, you almost feel like he's trying to cancel Ken Rose. Like, oh, I've run the show here. You can't talk bad about me. Who are you? Well, I'm the guy that comes up with all these inside stories that's on Twitter and got the guys from the newspapers and all that saying, oh, I heard Ken Rosenthal reported first. Not that it hurts Ken Rosenthal any, because he's still going to be on Fox, and he's still going to do his stuff in The Athletic. And MLB's kind of been going through a little shake-up there at that network, and I'm going to guess it's a way to save money. But when you have a good thing going, why F it up? And it's the same thing with this Aaron Rodgers reporter thing that says that Aaron Rodgers, she's not going to vote for Aaron Rodgers because he's a jerk. Because he's basically, and essentially what Aaron Rodgers said is, no, I'm not a jerk, I'm not vaccinated, so you're mad about it. And then the guy tried to apologize and say all this and that, but he's butthurt because Aaron Rodgers ain't bad. So he's trying to cancel Aaron Rodgers now, and now it's backfire. Which is the greatest thing in the world. And it backfired against Manfred with it. And like, hopefully it's making a turn. Like, I've probably said something stupid on this podcast. And there's 100 and something podcasts out there of just the sports blog. That doesn't count the greater STL Sports podcast. I did a podcast for a little bit called The Football Show. So there's 100 plus total podcasts on YouTube alone. And none of these new ones are even up on there. I don't even remember the last time I updated YouTube with the podcast. It might have been 2020 or 2019 or whatever the last time I did a podcast was. And I'm sure I said something that was stupid or, not mentally sane or something bad about women here or there. And I'm sure it happened. So go, find it, do what you gotta do. Send it to me because it's probably funny. So, but I'm glad this stuff's starting to backfire. And I think Dave Chappelle started that by just firing off and saying, oh, go ahead, try to cancel me and see what happens, Oh, being canceled, going out there and kind of look, being canceled is great. But like with Manfred, you had a good thing going. You're messing up a network that, I would think would be a decently watched network because they had some decent things going. Chris Rose has gone from Intentional Talk, which was probably their best show. And I don't know. I don't know who else left. I know Rosenthal and Chris Rose did, and that's big to me. But just for the reporter, you got a good thing going. You're voting for the MVP. You probably have, if you're voting for the MVP, you probably got a Hall of Fame vote. And now you look stupid as hell. You got to think of some of the people in the Pro Football Writers Association are probably thinking is there a way to get this guy out of here? This kind of looks bad on us. We're bringing this guy in because now you don't know where he's at in his head. I said I'm not going to do this, and then I'm going to apologize for it. But I still might hold a grudge just because I got in trouble on Twitter, so I got to apologize. Which is probably kind of good, my Twitter's now. If you're going to find something cancel culture, that was the place to find it, honestly. But that's another thing that ticks me off. I might just have a rant a week. We're trying to make it the same spot of the show. Last week was the beginning of the show about, just dealing with crap. But the cancel culture thing never made sense to me anyways. And it started long before that we started calling it cancel culture. The going on Twitter and finding these things that someone said 13 years ago, or things are totally different now. And I just don't understand what the difference was. And it's just people trying to be better than everything else. But, be smarter than everybody else. The movements don't help. And I'm not, do your thing. But, don't, because I don't represent it, don't tell me that I'm against it. Don't tell me that I'm against this. I have no problem with it. Nobody does. I don't have a problem with it. Nobody does. I don't have a problem if you're what you look like. I have no problems at all. I don't give a flying F. Why did I just say F right there? I don't care at all. Do you? I have enough problems being me for me to worry about you doing you. And that's a lot of the problem is, no. Well, I gotta fix you first. And a lot of the times, when I don't want to deal with my situations, I try to get in other people's shit. I'm not gonna lie. I'm oh yeah, I can help you with that, or you need to talk, just to get my mind off my retardedness. And that's something I could get canceled for saying that. And I've gotten in trouble and I've already gotten in trouble for saying it on Facebook before. Oh, you can't say that. You can't call yourself a retard because you're making fun of somebody. Well, if I'm calling myself stupid, how's I telling anybody else you're stupid? I never said that person that you're calling a retard right now is a retard. They might have something wrong with them. They might have, some kind of deficiency that I don't know about or, tend to care about. Now, if you're around me and you got something going on, yeah, I want to learn more on it. But other than that, if you don't know me and I don't know you, do you? We're all not perfect. I promise you that right there. And I know I'm one of the lowest of being perfect. And that's probably the worst thing to say while I'm doing a podcast and I'm making fun of this and that and this millionaires and crap like that. But I think 24/7, that's our essential goal, is to make our lives better. Me worrying about you doesn't help me none. Me worrying about what you're doing or what you believe or this or that, because I've said plenty of times before I don't believe in things, even on this podcast or not on this podcast or anywhere, that have got to be the day to where I seem to believe in some of them. COVID was one of them. I'm not going to lie, I was a big, it's the flu, And then, the crazy, and I made fun of the crazies for, going shopping. They didn't do it on this podcast, of course, which would have been great. Because I probably would have said a lot more than I'm going to say. Because I believe in it now. I believe, hey, people are getting sick for something that wasn't there before. And, people were like, oh, look at the Lysol do. And, you read the Lysol can, and it said right there, COVID-14, which is something that we never even heard of. Also, COVID-19 is the biggest thing in the world. It's a little more believable when I thought about and the Omicron and all this. Like, that stuff's kind of scary. I think you try not to scare yourself when you put yourself in that positions. Like, when you don't want to believe something. When you don't want to believe, like, hey, I could get sick and die from something this little. Because when I had bronchitis and pneumonia at the same time, I was done for. So I couldn't imagine getting COVID and, not being able to work and having to worry about that kind of stuff. And I feel for the people that have had to. But I'm not going around and saying, hey, you got COVID? You got COVID before? Were you vaccinated? I don't care. Do you? It's like walking around and it'd be like a girl walking up to you in a bar and be like, hey, I don't like if you're not snipped. Are you snipped? Like, who cares? My parents decided to do it. My parents did decide to do it. Who cares? I didn't get to make that decision. My parents made a decision for me. Maybe we'll tease that for we'll get questions from people and, we'll try to make people listen to the podcast more and say, oh, I wonder if he's ever going to talk about if he's snipped or not. And I could be snipped in multiple ways in general if you want to say it that way. But it's just crazy to think about that somebody can go out there and say one thing that, hey, I heard this person say, and you're done for. And now it's starting to backfire on all these people, which is great. It's refreshing. It doesn't make any sense why anybody would want to bring down anybody. Why bring down somebody just because they were better than you at one point? That's essentially what cancel culture is. This person's better than me at this point in their life, and I'm not happy about it because they said something about gay people 37 years ago, and I found it. But I only looked it up because that person's better than me, and I wanted to know, what kind of person that is, or, whatever. Who cares? That's where I'm at in life. I'm like, who cares about you? And that's like me talking to you. I want everybody to be in good health. I don't care what you're doing behind closed doors. I don't care what you're doing out in the middle of the road, or in the Dollar General, or in the grocery store, the gas station. Do you? But hey, I'm going to stand 6 feet away. That's just something I'm going to do. I'm not going to wear a mask until I'm forced to. But I am going to take that little 6 foot, extension and be like, yeah, I'd rather not have it. So there's my rant of the week. Alright, we're going to take a break. This is the Greater STL Sports Podcast on the all-new SG4L Media Network. Hello and welcome back to the Greater STL Sports Podcast on the all-new SG4L Media Network. Robert Bolsey back with you. You could tweet the show at Gstlsp. You can tweet the network at SG4L Media NTWK1, which we'll try to shorten that out for you. Now, before I get back into sports, there's actually a way to leave me voicemails and stuff for the show, which I knew before. I'm going to try to find out a link to it, but like I said, trying to add stuff to the show. Maybe I'll get these voicemails and maybe do a Facebook Live or something like that and answer the questions on there. Or maybe answer them on the podcast. I kind of wanted to hear them. I don't know how good they would sound with the equipment that I got right now. I don't know how good they would sound getting played on the same thing I'm recording on. So it'd be easier to kind of do that on a Facebook Live or something. But anyways, tweet the show at GSTLSP, tweet the network at SG4L Media NTWK1. Now, I said I wasn't going to talk about a goalie controversy on this podcast. And we're going to talk about a goalie controversy on the podcast. And the Blues are still rolling, even with Bennington in there. I mean, he just looks good one game, he looks bad one game. And his stats aren't all that horrible. Which bodes well for the Blues, but the way that Husso's played this year is, it's almost like Bennington back in 2019. And he was already the backup goalie. It wasn't like the half of the season where Bennington was down there, but he has been out a long time with an injury, and then I think he might have got COVID in there, but I know he was out with an injury for a while. But I'm going to go like a half a goalie controversy. I'm going to say like play Bennington on the road and play Husso at home. And of course I got stats to back that up. And I don't have road stats for Bennington. I should have probably looked at that. But I just seen a tweet and I was like, I mean, that's a pretty good tweet for Husso. But just on the season, let's go with Husso. 8 games, 8 starts, 4-2-1, 228, 931. 228 goals against, 931 saves. I mean, that's pretty effing good. Now, those aren't Bennington 2019 numbers. Pretty darn close, though. Now, the problem with trying to create a controversy is for Bennington just to be horrible. It's usually what happens. But it's really just that Husso's been that good. Definitely at home. 6-0, 6-0-0, 143 goals against, 953 in his last 7 appearances at home. Now, I wrote that stat wrong earlier. I wrote last 7 starts at home. It's actually last 7 appearances. 6-0-0, obviously. But he looks like a starting goaltender in this league. And he's just a guy like Bennington. He's been hanging on the roster for a couple years. He's been your third. He was your third goaltender over Bennington. That's something to think about. As at the one point, your starting goalie in the 2019 Stanley Cup, your winning goalie in this 2019 Stanley Cup, was behind on the depth chart to a guy that's playing better than him right now. And the offense has kind of saved Bennington. I mean, it's nice, and I think the league has just changed. Like, teams are just scoring more goals, and it's because they kind of went from the big man. There's not many teams with like guys that go out there and just get it, just go fight anymore. Ryan Reeves is still hanging around barely, but he seems to switch teams every year, and they're just going to a more goal scorer league. They're going after more goal scoring talent than they are going with the fighters. I mean, just a couple years ago, I was just thinking about this bit, and I guess it was maybe 10 years ago. But you had Backus, who's a big guy, who would go out there and take a scrap. But Jansen, Reed Lowe, Roman Polak. I mean, you just had big, stout guys going out there and getting it. And now the teams are just more athletic. And really, it's been Kyrie. You just put that kid anywhere, and I'll talk more about that in a little while. But when a team's kind of rolling like this and they're scoring, and Bennington, I'm not gonna say he cost you. I'm gonna say your defense cost you that game in Pittsburgh, but also Sidney Crosby turned into Sidney Crosby. But once the game got out of hand, people weren't talking about that. I think it was the second goal that it was a bad goal. Bennington shouldn't have let that in, and it might have been a third goal to tie it. I can't really remember. But you're up twice in that game, 2-1, or 2 goals, and Bennington just can't shut it down. And your defense ain't shutting it down either. Now, I know you're missing guys. You got guys out with COVID. It's crazy how they can switch guys in and out. I mean, they brought up a new guy. I didn't even know played this year named Rosen because they got 6 players in COVID now. Perron, Sheen, Brandon Shin. I think I did that 3 weeks in a row. It just makes no sense. I can say his name any other time I get on the show. I want to call him Brendan Sheen, like he's Charlie Sheen's brother or something. Scott Perovich is on the COVID list also. So it's just crazy to even think. Like, you sit some guys down just because they've been on your taxi squad, not getting the work they probably should get in, being on the taxi squad. And you just move them down to Springfield, have them play a game, bring them right back up here. Hey, we need you now. But hey, we'll get you some action. And I think they did that with Dakota Joshua and someone else the other day. James Neal might have been the guy. And this is what you're down to with this team. So you might want to put the best goaltender in there. And the Blues are in 36 games this season. 28 started by Bennington and Husso. But 36 are 21, 10, and 5. 47 points. I mean, that's not bad at all. Bennington and the 21 games he started, 11, 7, and 3. 2.90 goals against. .910 save percentage. Now, what people have to understand is Bennett has just played that many more games than, almost a third, or, excuse me, he's played in 3 times the games that Huso's played in, almost. 21-7, or 21-8. So you gotta imagine the stats are gonna go up the more you play, the more teams get to know where your weaknesses are and stuff like that. Now you're getting to your 3rd year with him as your goaltender. So it's easier to find weaknesses when you see a guy like more often. And really, with Huso being out, you've only seen him 8 games this year. So it's going to be hard to pinpoint the weaknesses and stuff. But like I said, with the different type of skill players that are coming in the league that aren't only can play a physical game, but are also goal scorers. And they're not going to play the physical game that Ryan Reeves is going to play, or, as I mentioned earlier, that Cam Jansen would have played, or Kelly Chase or Tony Twist. But they can still play a physical game because guys are just bigger, stronger, faster, and that's just how it works. So it's easier to fade the Ryan Reeves out of the game. You got a guy like Matthew Tkachuk to go out there and he'll scrap with you anytime, but he's one of the best goal scorers in the league. And them Tkachuk's kids don't play. I am so down for one of them to come to St. Louis because they'll go out there, they'll score a couple goals against you, but they'll also go out there and get their fights too. I want to look up how many Gordie Howe hat tricks that Matthew Tkachuk has, which I think is a goal, an assist, and a fight. It's got to be a decent number. But with all these skill players that are coming in the league, you've got to expect that certain stats are going to go up. The goals against and the save percentage, definitely when you're playing most of your team's games. And I think that's the same thing with Lindgren when he was here. It's not like he played a bunch of games in the NHL even before he got here, but he only played 5 here. Maybe 6. So he's right around that Huso number, and it's, if you're not going to be able to get a big scouting report off 6 games. It's not easier to get it over 3 years. And I said it last week. I think Binnington's attitude gets to him sometimes when something goes wrong. It just spirals out of control for him at certain times. Definitely gets the more talkative teams. And that's the problem I think he thinks he has to protect himself because we have a team where we got the skill position players, not only on offense, but our defense wants to be skill position players. So I think it's more of a protect himself thing. Like, I would love to have a guy like Pat Maroon here. If you've seen this, another video to look up. I'm going to have 2 in this segment about that. But Pat Maroon was playing the Boston Bruins, who we beat in the 2019 Stanley Cup, and Brad Marchand, who is just a dick. And I never understood the people that make $1 million and just are complete and total just asses. Just don't understand it. So you're out there and make $1 million to play a game, and I understand all the work you got to go to get there. It's not like people say, like, oh, they're going out there, they're playing a kid's game. Well, if you played a kid's game, kind of like that tweet earlier, Serena Williams and I can both play tennis. Well, if it's a kid's game, I can go play some hockey too. I'd be in the NHL right now, and I never played a lick of hockey. So I understand all the work they got to, and it's probably rough, and a lot of going out there and late nights, and a lot of traveling and all that. Definitely with hockey, hockey's a lot different. It's not, a lot of high schools don't cover the stuff that they pay for. It's a lot of the parents, so it's a lot of road trips and all that. So I understand, like, it's got to be a rough stretch. But man, when you're just go out there and you're just the biggest ass in the fucking whole league. It doesn't make any sense to me. If I had $1 million right now and I was playing hockey or whatever, even the minimum, which I think, like they said, the minor leagues minimum was, or major league minimum was like $97,000, and I'm like, I would take that and be a happy camper. $97 a year, hell yeah. Definitely after the last 2 years with COVID, that's almost quadruple what I've made each year. If I had $100,000 a year. But Pat Maroon goes out there, and he's a guy, he's not the skill guy. He's kind of like the Ryan Reeves guy. He's a physical guy. Does the things you need to, gets in front of the net. Kind of look what Backus turned into the last few years here. He wasn't that guy that was going out there and get you 30 goals, but he was that guy standing in front of the net, taking the putts, taking the cheap shots. Going out there and getting hurt for this team to have a chance to win. It sucks that he wasn't on that 2019 team. It really sucks that we played against him when he was in Boston. That really hurt me a little bit. I'm a big fan of David Backus. So would love like another guy like that here, but he plays in Tampa Bay. Could have a chance to win his 4th Stanley Cup in a row. So Brad Marchand, who says, "Oh, I own you, Pat." Whatever. They're chirping back and forth. And the funny thing is, when I was watching the video, is a kid from St. Louis who probably had something to do, knows Pat a little bit from the Blues alumni AAA team, whatever it's called, but probably Pat had something to do with it. So you would expect the alumni of that team to go out there and help the kids. Was actually chirping, and Maroon just kind of passed that off and went after Marchand and said, I have 3 Stanley Cups. How many do you have? That's the kind of guy that you kind of want around here. Big, tough, physical guy that's going to go out there and is going to go after a guy like Brad Marchand who goes out there and tries to tear you up. Or a guy like Tom Wilson. Like, we don't have the protection from a guy like a Tom Wilson who's a cheap shot artist. Or, I was going to say Claude, but it's his son, Brandon Lemieux. Or anybody like that. A guy to protect us, a Ryan Reeves type. That we need to be protected from. We don't have that on this roster. So that's my point by playing the best goalie. And that's why I went split on, because if Husso stats at home are just crazy. The 1.43 goals against, that's out of your mind good. Just playing a little bit that he has. Usually the backup goalie's stats are way off the wall when you look at it compared to the starting goalie stats. Like here in the few years before Bennington, you had a Carter Hutton who you could go on there and think that, hey, could probably play over Jake Allen. Same thing with Brian Elliott, who kind of got a raw into the deal here, who I think still playing in the league, might still be starting in the league. Guy who I really liked, it's all kind of raw deal, which seems like it happens sometimes with the Blues, that it's not that they give up on players, but they're trying to shuffle in and out, and they have to do it with the salary cap. Understandable, so understandable. Makes 100% of sense. But could you maybe went with Brian Elliott and used Jake Allen as trade bait instead of giving him a contract because he had one good half a season? And that was the whole thing about Bennington. Is I understand you got to pay the guy, but let's not go outrageous with it. Let's not turn this into a Matt Carpenter thing. Even though Matt Carpenter, you could tell that more of his was getting older and people figuring him out. But let's not put ourselves in that situation where we still got to be doing this every year. And we can't get the skilled players here because we don't pay our goalie too much. And I don't see a 50-50 split ever happening with this. I can see a 2/3 split, 2/3 Bennington, a third Husso, which is about how it goes anyways. And I think you can see Husso getting a little more time in there. Definitely if Bennington starts to struggle a little bit. But this isn't a bad problem to have. Now, it'd be a bad problem to have if Bennington was playing horrible and you got this contract and you got to play him and you got to try to instill confidence in the guy that's going to be your guy. But you got 2 guys on this team. One's pretty confident in himself, as we know about Bennington, and one should be the way he's playing. So you got 2 guys that can go out and think they're going to win every game they play. And when that's the guy that has the most influence in the game, that's not a bad thing to have. Definitely with the way that Tarasenko's playing. Definitely the way that Buchnevic's playing. Or Buchnevich. I think I got his name right for once. Yippee! But now you've turned this Kyrou kid into something, which I was trying to think earlier, and I'm going to have to go back and listen, and I'm probably going to go back and listen to some old podcasts and start pulling stuff out and probably throwing it up on Facebook or somewhere like that and just see, like, let's compare 2016 to 2021 or whatever like that, whatever I said. But I'm pretty sure I've been on the Kyrie train for a while. I can get rid of Cam Closton. Which would have probably been a bad decision because who knows what you would have got for him and who knows when you would have needed him 2-3 years down the road like you do now. Or 4 or 5 or whenever I was talking about it. And how were you supposed to know what this was going to develop into? I mean, the kid's always had speed. You know he's got skill. But you didn't expect this. You didn't expect in 32 games for him to have 36 points. And it's not like he's going out there and just, I'm going to be a goal scorer first. He's a big assist guy. And that's something you need. And that's what's great is you could play him on any line and he looks good. I mean, the goal he scored the other night against Dallas to win the game, which was an amazing game. The Blues for 58 minutes looked like just a regular another NHL team. And for the last 2 minutes, probably got away with the penalty there in the Riley goal. But in the last 2 minutes, looked like one of the best teams in hockey. But when he tries to win the game the other night, Kyrou, he's trying to actually pass the puck and it goes off of a Dallas Stars player, I think, skate. But he now has a record for most points in a Winter Classic game. You've moved him on the line with two more of your better skill players with Tarasenko and Thomas, but you've played him everywhere. I mean, this guy's been on good lines with Thomas and Bunashev and who knows, Nathan Walker, Brendan Shin, probably somewhere down there with James Neal, but he's looked good everywhere he's been. If he had some kind of a physical game, you would just say he's probably one of the top 5 players in the league, and he's probably in the top 5 in skill players. He always seems like he's open. He's always seemed like he's somewhere near a puck. It's always seemed like he's the first one onto a puck. A lot of that has to do with with the speed that he has. And it's just another thing in the Blues office when you've got everybody thinking, well, maybe we have to trade a Kyrou to get to this point. Or maybe we have to do this to get to this point. No, we'll just throw these little players in here. We'll throw Perron in here. Let Kyrou build a skill set and look what's happened. Look at it work. I don't think Alexander Steen staying here for so long. Bringing in the guys like Paul Stastny for a year or Pat Maroon. So you let kids like Closton and Jake Neighbors, Dakota Johnson, you let these guys develop. I mean, you don't see that many other teams. Many other teams have to go when they get this first round pick, when they get these Sidney Crosbys or these events, they have to go for it. And it just seems like the Blues every time. It's just like, oh, that guy was a first round pick and 4 years ago. Wow, that's at 18 years old or 20 years old. Now they did it a little bit with Jake Neighbors, but they gave him a little trial, sent him back down, let him get a lick of a league, let him see what he needed to focus on. And by now you throw him back down for a little bit and let him work on them things in a league that he's probably going to look good at. He's going to get a little more confidence. Be like, oh, I can play down here. And once he knows what he needs to work, he's like, oh, I got this going. Whether it was stick handling or shooting or whatever it was. And he built this guy's confidence up so much that he turns into a Kyrou. And every time you look at the guy, I mean, it's just, he's flying on the ice. He probably isn't too good on defense. I think that's probably in line with him. When Tarasenko and Thomas, you probably throw your top forwards out there. Or maybe you throw that Bertuzzo line out there. Which I'm a little... And everybody wants the Blues to get another defenseman because we have offensive defensemen. But if you think about it, who are you taking out? You're going to take out a Michael who's been playing pretty well, Scandella who's been playing great. Are you going to take your one physical defensive defenseman out there and Bertuzzo, which I have a bad feeling it's going to be Bertuzzo. I don't want none of the guys out right now. Keep this little round robin going. Keep these guys all fresh. Keep them all knowing that they're going to, confidence is high, that they know they're going to get ice time. Because if you can bring another defenseman in here, but are you going to mess up something what you got going that's good? And I've been probably complaining about Bertuzzo for a good 4 or 5 years, and I was big on it with Zach Sanford too. So those guys just seem like they're on the back burner on the Blues. Like, hey, we can sit this guy out and try to get this guy or this guy. And Zach Sanford was a guy to me that was like kind of like the Kachucks. Not as good, but could go out there and get you a goal when you needed it, and had a physical game, and protected your players. Because I can't think of one guy that can even protect your captain right now, in Parayko. That's the guy you don't want out there being that guy that's out there fighting. He's the leader of your team. And you've had these guys before that protect your captains with Reeds or Pietrangelo. And going back to what I talked about before with the Janssens and the Reed Lows. You don't have that anymore. So Bertuzzo's that guy that can go out there and be like, well, when someone gets a big hit on Parayko, well, he's going to go out there and get that big hit on them. And whenever his shift comes up. So I understand getting another guy like that you want. Or that you think could be, a better Bertuzzo. But do you mess up something in a Scandella? Or do you mess up something in a Michael? Do you lose your other edge of Bertuzzo? And I said it in last week's show. I really think that the Blues should stand pat. Because whatever you're doing is working. It's kind of like the Cardinals last year. Like, I would have rather them either sell or stay pat. And that's essentially what they did with getting Happ and Lester. It just got good at a point. So maybe the Blues are thinking that way, well, we get this one guy and it gets good at that point. But it hasn't been bad. Small little stretches here and there. But nothing like where you're the worst team of the month, like I think the Cardinals were in May or whatever it was. Nothing that the Dakota Joshuas, the Nathan Walkers of the world haven't fixed yet. So maybe you're thinking, well, with the COVID thing going on, we get this guy, we can move people around and keep them fresh and move people to the taxi squad and maybe move Scott down to back so you don't have to worry about Perotovich or whatever his name is. I'm going to have to learn these players' names pretty good because I keep messing them up. Move back down to the AHL and build up his skill set like they did with everybody else. So I understand it, but who do you lose if you don't have nothing? If COVID goes away? That's my whole thing about it. Is when you got a good chemistry going, and I'm going to say that a lot of this is probably Craig Berube. He's probably the guy that got these. This seems like to get these guys in his mindset. You watch these after game videos on Twitter and stuff, and he's like the craziest guy in the room. And maybe he's just learned over the years, like, because he was a guy that went out there and wasn't why protecting the players, so he did a lot of bench sitting, definitely with fighting or game misconducts or anything like that. So he probably seen, well, hey, I seen this coach do this, and this worked. Or when I was under this guy, or when I coached Philadelphia as a head coach, I seen, well, the things I do this way didn't work, but these things can work, and let me go under somebody else and learn, like a Ken Hitchcock, or somebody like that, and learn, well, let's see what works for them, and let's see what doesn't work for them. And let's put it all together. And I think that he's the one that keeps this team with the enthusiasm and the confidence that they have. Because I don't think a lot of coaches would take what Bennington's done and sometimes hurt the team. I think he's more of a guy that protects his team and gets over what his own team does. it makes more of the focus is like on what they did right instead of what they did wrong, and I think that's going to instill a lot of confidence. I think like a guy like Tortorella, I don't think has that kind of skill set. Like him as a coach, thinks he's funny, Polly. I called Brad Marchand an ass earlier, but I know a little bit more about him. And from what I heard about Tortorella, he's not the biggest. He's just another Mike Keenan. So I don't know if like you can mess the chemistry up because of how good of a coach and how the way he's kept this team in the shape he has. And I guess it also depends on who you trade and who you have to get rid of. I think if you get a big guy like that, you can get rid of a guy like Clawson. You have that opportunity now. But you still have that opportunity with Tarasenko still, too. I mean, his stock is probably higher than it's ever been. And then maybe you keep that young guy like Clawson, and because you already got your Tarasenko and Kyrou, and maybe you have a guy like Ken Clawson that could turn into a subsidiary, a smaller Jordan Kyrou. And then this defender comes in here and it lights up the world. So it's the Blues almost put themselves in a rock and a hard place because you are fighting division spots. So do you want to get better, or can you make this team better as is? And I don't know if you can, and if you do, I don't know if you want to mess up chemistry. Now, I have been, with this podcast, getting way more into college basketball. At least around the state. I'll say that. Because someone tweeted the other day that there's only a few people in St. Louis media that pay attention to Illinois. And I listen to enough sports podcasts where I wouldn't say that's all the way true, because I hear it a lot. Yeah, 101's big on it. 590 talks about it enough. Then I could tell you one play. I can't even tell you that player's name. I know his name's Kofi. I could tell you last week, I still can only name one player on Mizzou. And I named 5 off of a slew. But it started off as a good week for if you were a college Who's fan. And the whole, and I get the Mizzou and Alabama thing in a minute. Like the slew playing at Iona thing, and like it seemed like a big win, and blah blah blah, and we got a last second shot to win, and Iona's decent, I guess. Funny that the one team they played that was a decent team was Alabama, who they beat, and they also got beat. Alabama got beat by Mizzou. But yeah, when I started looking up their schedule and seeing all this, I was like, why do people consider that such a big win? And I was thinking it was because Rick Pitino's coach team. Since he's been there, they've been a lot better. Blah blah blah. But it's not like they're anything special. Like this big great team. So most of it had to be because Rick Pitino was in St. Louis. I mean, that's all it could be. And I guess getting the game winner and all that, and Yuri looked great until tonight. But you would kind of hope that had been a confidence builder also, with getting that big last second win. And, non-conference games I know matter, but I don't think non-conference games against Iona matter. Like the non-conference games against Auburn, SLU, that's a big game for SLU. To keep in it like that, to keep it close, to not make it, the SEC versus the A-10. Which in football would, I don't think A-10 has any football teams, but it would look a whole lot different in football. Auburn versus SLU. So you're kind of hoping that would extend into the A-10 to conference play, and they go out and kind of skunk one up against Dayton tonight. And of course, the score at the end, it looks a lot closer with 66-60. But they were up. You kind of feel like teams lit off when they're up by a certain amount of points. So going into the half, Dayton was up by 10, and you just had to play a decent second half, and you could keep it right there. And Larry Collins just didn't look like Yuri Collins. A lot of turnovers, a lot of bad shots. And SLU just couldn't keep them off the free throw line, comparably to what they got. Jimerson didn't really start off the game all that great. That doesn't help. But when a team more doubles your free throws, you're just not going to win those type of games. And that really sucks. Because you did go to a part of the schedule where SLU could have kind of ran this conference over. Because if you beat Dayton, then you have horrible teams at Fordham, UMass, back-to-back. George Washington's in there. And then Duquesne, and then George Mason. And that's a stretch that could put you in a spot. Definitely when you beat Dayton and you kept it close with a team like Auburn, to put you in a good spot to easily get in the NCAA playoffs without having to win your division, which it seems like it's getting harder and harder for 10 teams to get in there without winning their division because of all the Cinderella teams and stuff like that, all the smaller, not even the non-Power 5, but just the smaller conferences, the Missouri Valleys of the world. And that could be a stretch for your 8-0 in your conference at the time. And I didn't look up Davis' schedule, which they're just a better team in the first place. But starting off 8-0 in your conference is going to bode well when you're trying to get into that tournament. And that's what sucks about Mizzou at that point. At the same time, is they just didn't play good. They haven't played good in them games that you were hoping they would keep it close. The Illinois, the Kentuckys, the UMKCs. But when SLU, like I was saying last week, when SLU's in this conference, you have to get the games that you're supposed to win, but you need the games that are going to be close games. You have to pick some of them games up. It just sucks when you play a team like Auburn and you keep it close and you had a shot to win, and then you go out and you defeat Iona in the last second. That you go out and kind of get a stinker up. I just think that Yuri was like, hey, I had a great game last game. Like, let's go out there and get this again. That's a lot different when you're on the road and stuff like that. You're in a different atmosphere. Nothing's really going. I mean, you got the Bengals in Ohio right now, but, it's a much bigger, I think, different atmosphere than going out and playing Iona at the Chaffetz Arena. I mean, any road game is a struggle for any team. But this is a game that you gotta win, and you had to win this Dayton game to get a shot without having to run the gauntlet in your conference, which meant beat all these teams that you're supposed to beat, the UMasses and the George Masons and the George Washington, the Duquesnes and Fordhams, and beat all them. But now you're going to have to probably win your tournament to get in. And I just like this team so much. I just like the way they play. That I really thought that, hey, we're going to go out here, we're going to kill Dayton. And then we got this little stretch where, man, it's kind of easy picking right there. And I guess it's just for some excitement. Definitely, when the college football teams suck, you don't have the Rams right now. So you're getting into the playoffs in the NFL that I'm not even paying no attention to. I probably might go into it a little bit next week after I watch some games, maybe. I don't know. I'm just not, like I said, I'm not in the NFL, and I think it's caused me some college football fandom too. But also gained a year with college basketball. Now with Auburn being number 4 in the country, man, that loss against Dayton was kind of bad tonight. when you kept that game close. And now you got to make sure you use none of these other games. And the Mizzou thing's just so weird, too, because that's why I'm so high on SLU and like their team so much. I mean, not only do I like the way they play and the way they're coached and all that, love Travis Ford, but with Mizzou not being as good as you want them to be, I mean, you're one shot. If you're a Missouri fan like I am, I'm not an Illinois fan, so my one shot was SLU, I thought. But now all of a sudden you see Missouri playing halfway decent games. At the time they beat Alabama at the and Kofi Brown Kobe Brown said he was the only player to watch. What does he do? He goes out there in a big game and just shoots the lights out. And Mizzou's team shut the lights out from three, and Alabama struggled from three. They led by three to die by three. That's a new rule in basketball. But if they play like they did against Alabama, who they're going to play again in a couple games, now you think that they might have a shot. And it kind of sucks in a way, because now if they go on a big losing streak, or they start playing like they did in the Illinois and the Kentucky and the Kansas and OMKC, which I'm just going to keep harping on them for. And the one time they looked good, they did it against a ranked team, and you thought they had a shot. Like if they go out to lose to Arkansas next week, or in a couple days, if they go out there and lose to Arkansas, who's just falling apart, you're going to be like, oh yeah, this is the Mizzou team I remember. You're not even going to remember the Alabama game. And they got a nice little stretch to come up to where if you do something good right here, you have a shot to make it to the NCAA playoffs after what started off as just a lost season. I mean, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, all winnable games. And then you've already beat Alabama. SLU played Auburn close, and they're number 4 in the country. Wouldn't that be something? And then you go to Iowa, and then you play Iowa State, and they're number 15. So you got 3 ranked games in a row at this point. And that could all change. 2 of the teams could falter real quick, Iowa State and Alabama. Now you got 25 games, and then 3 games in a row of teams that you should probably beat. If you play like you did. If you play like you did again early in the season, then yeah, you should beat Arkansas. And then after that, it's a toss-up. And it would just be disappointing to not have no representation. When we had so many years with Mizzou for sure getting in, but just decent teams by SLU where you're like, oh, they got a shot, they got a shot, they got a shot. Rick Majerus, Jim Cruz. You know, it was exciting, and it just seems like there's so many up and downs and up and down. You almost, like, man, this is hurting my heart a little bit. Like, I maybe need to stop relying, like, saying this is the year. And I get a little more excited about it just because it's more of a spectacle than the regular season than baseball is. Because it's such a long season. And that's what I don't get. And I don't get about the things with MLB says, oh, we need to shut down the time. Like, NFL games are 3 hours. I mean, some of these college basketball games are forever. Definitely with all the fouling. NBA games are 3 hours. So I never understood the MLB saying, oh, this is it, we have to shorten the time, Somebody's going to sit down and watch TV, they're going to sit down and watch TV. It's just a lot of people now are short with so many channels and so many streaming. It's short attention span theater. God, that was a struggle. But and what that means is that, well, okay, we're on a commercial. I don't really want to watch the Tampax commercial, and why I couldn't think of anything else there. The Walmart commercial, I don't want to watch that, so let me go throw it on. Oh, I got this channel that has, an episode of Impractical Jokers that I, for some reason, get stuck on. Or this and that, or, definitely with Netflix, and, you could be like, oh, I'll switch to Netflix real quick. Which I think that if, like, more of these, the Hulus of the world, Netflixes, got more into these sports things, I think that's where you need to go. I got back on baseball talking about college basketball. So, that was nothing new. But, and that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, it's more of a spectacle. More people are going to sit down and watch that NCAA tournament over a regular season baseball game. And I think that's what, and I think I would too. I think it's because it's more of a spectacle. It's more of the big time. You know, hey, man, there's 64 teams. We win these 3 or 4 games, we have a shot, you know. You know, we sneak one in here or there. Or this bad team beats this good team somehow. We get them in the next round after we, you know, do our thing. And the one game, it's a toss-up. It's more of an experience. And that's what sucks is that you haven't got to see that from the teams in the last few years. I mean, and SLU's been right there. Missouri hasn't, but SLU has. And I would much rather see SLU and Mizzou in there. And I have no good reason for that. I mean, because my fandom in college basketball started with Mizzou. And I think Larry Hughes coming to SLU helped a lot. I think them making an effort with the coaches that they had here with the Rick Majerus and Jim Cruzes, and you know, they tried. I mean, Rick Majerus, you would have, you know, people, that's a name recognition. Then you got a guy that goes out there and recruits like Jim Cruz did. It's a little more interesting than Mizzou going in and trying to get the best players, and they suck. Never was a big fan. I never understood the Phil Pressey thing. So it's just, man, you were like, SLU was right there. They were right there. They had it for the taking. Because they played a decent first half until the last few minutes, and you're just like, man, that just, you know, and it gets even more disappointing because the day before, Mizzou goes out there and beat Alabama, and he's like, man, this is what this team could be if they played like they play, and they don't, you know, they play as a team and not as individuals, and if they made some shots once in a while. And then you just expect something when they go to Arkansas, and you just expect them to not show up. And it sucks to have to think about it that way. So that's going to do it. For my Grandma Hicks, love you, Grandma. For my Grandma Bowlesby, Lori, and Paul, miss you guys. For Jake, Madeline, Zach, Joe, and Little Rhiannon, this has been Robert Bowlesby with the Greater STL Sports Podcast on the all-new SG4L Media Network.